Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the ASTROLABE, brought to you by King Pilled. I'm your host, I'm Matt. And today, you guys are going to get to experience a little bit of the show prep process with me. It's been an interesting morning thus far. And right every time I sat down, it was about ready to go, something pulled me away. And so I wasn't able to do all the show prep. So I've got some of the things prepped and ready to go. And then the rest of this will be a spontaneous variety show for me as much as it is for you guys. So welcome. Happy July. It is now July. It's hard to believe in terms of time that it's July. It seems like just yesterday it was New Year's. And the reason those two dates are attached in my head is because those are the span of several days where our dog just completely loses his mind and is inconsolable and just follows us everywhere around the house and pants at us. And so those are like the poles of my year. Those dates attach themselves in my mind for that reason. So and now we've got two extra little dogs, and TBD how they're going to respond. That was part of the reason why I was late getting started here, is managing the little dogs. It's funny how much a little dog, how much work a little dog can be compared to a big dog. What's up, Slosher? He says, it's a great day to have a great day, damn straight. But I'm on night shift, so I'll catch the replay. Have a good show, guys. Well, thanks for dropping in, buddy. Hopefully you enjoy the replay. Bill Hicks is here. What's up, man? He says, smash that like. Colin is prepared. Speaking of Colin, I did some shows this weekend. Guested on some other people's shows. First one, I got it here. Cursed World Problems Podcast. Best podcast name of all time. Just when he told me that's what he was going to call it, I was like, yeah, that's you have won the podcast name lottery. And it actually lives up to the name, surprisingly enough. But Colin invited Cooper and I on short notice to jump on, and he's kind of testing out his streaming software and getting everything set up. And so he had a couple things to discuss. We talked about White Boy Summer, and we had a conversation about voting, and then we talked about some other stuff as well. Go listen to it to hear. So this was Cursed World Problems Podcast. I posted it June 29th. Then last night, I hopped on briefly for about 20 minutes with good friend of the show, Buck Johnson. He invited the fake Matthew. We have to have a Matthew war now. I just learned that the Prudentialist's name is Matthew. So he and I are going to have to fight. But so you had the Prudentialist and Jason from the 2-Bit Podcast on with him. And then you can see here, where is it? Right toward the end. Man, how long did you guys go? You guys went for a long time. So there we go. See, my face. My face was there. I was there. I hopped in for about 20 minutes, and I wasn't able to catch the rest of their conversation, but knowing the guys who were talking and what they were talking about when I came in, I know it's going to be very good. So that one's on my list, my to-do list to go back and listen to. Then, let's see, another one here. Last night, the reason I had to leave that one early is I did a space. See, I felt like a boomer the whole time I was doing this. I've never been a part of a space on Twitter, on X before. And see, like Twitter Spaces, to me, the platform is Twitter. But then when we're talking about spaces, then my mind wants to say like spaces on X. So they might actually be starting to break me. I've been a holdout that it's Twitter, it's not X, but they may be starting to break me with the spaces. So Meta Prime invited me on with a couple other guys, Arcology Research and the Knowledge Archivist. And then there was a handful of other people that jumped on as well. And we talked about the coming disclosure of dark technology. Melon says you did great on that Space King Pill. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I was having trouble with being able to hear. Like sometimes someone would start talking and I just wouldn't be able to hear them. The only thing I could do is start just close the app and start over again. So still a little bit buggy. But it's a cool format. I do think it would be cool if there was a chat associated with it, because I kept finding myself sitting there listening to other people and instinctively wanting to go read the chat. And there's replies to the tweet, but those don't show up in real time. And it's really, you're just kind of navigating over to Twitter to reply to replies on the tweet versus having a live chat there with it. So I think the concept of a space is very interesting. I think it has the potential to really overtake YouTube in terms of streaming and commentary, basically being the, I don't know, like Twitch for politics and business, and less about entertainment and more about long form conversations. So yeah, I think the one thing that would really be holding it back would be having some sort of a chat feature where you can interact with the audience in real time, rather than just, there's people from the audience can raise their hand and they can come in and talk, but from the host's participant, from the speaker's perspective, it's kind of like, it just feels like, oh, there's other people chatting on the panel versus actually really being able to interact with the audience. So anyways, that was my first space. Really enjoyed it. We had a really good talk about the forming, the breaking of the regime coalition and the simultaneous forming of a new coalition, and what that's going to look like, what their priorities and incentives are, what's driving them in that direction, and why, what they may begin congealing around. And part of it is energy. Energy is maybe the single most important industry on the planet, and the inability for dark tech to be released and mass produced is in large part due to the established energy interests. Well, those established energy interests are creating a vacuum for power for any sort of rival coalition that might see this as an angle toward power. And the fact that this rival coalition is made up of essentially tech bros makes, there's some interesting dots you can begin to connect there. So we were discussing this and the implications of all of it. Even talked briefly about the pole shift, which I think we're going to keep hearing more and more about. But anyways, so that's another podcast. I did three shows over the weekend, and I have another one tonight. I'm not sure if it's a live stream or if we're recording, but I'll be talking with Justin Campbell about balancing online life with real life. So keep an eye out for that one as well. Another show that I haven't listened to yet, but I know that it's going to be very good, so I'm going to tell you guys about it ahead of time. Lee from Twitter went on Jay Burden, the premier coal poster himself, had perhaps the best tweeter. Like, Lee may be the most underappreciated tweeter on Twitter. So apparently he has a voice as well, and check that out. I see a familiar face down here. Glonk Respector sneaking into the screenshot. What's up, Glonk? I see he's in the chat too. So yeah, Lee on Jay Burden is going to be very, very good. I already know it is. Lee Enfield. So I have that in my to-do list to listen to. All right, so let's mosey on over to the bookmarks here and pick out some of the, let's see, I know I'm going to talk about this later. So we're going to talk about the McDonald's ice cream machines later. That'll be interesting. And then this, I know I want to talk about John McAfee's tweet. Good friend of the show, Lex, had an interesting comment here on Zuckerberg's heel to face turn. Wanted to discuss that. I know there's one thread in particular that I want to make sure that I get. And it was from Austin Allred talking about the actual, like from his personal experience, the implications of the Chevron deference case. One of the really annoying things, part of the reason why prepping for the show can actually be really annoying sometimes, is because Twitter's bookmarks don't sort in the order that you put them in, and it doesn't always display all of them. So you have to like scroll all the way to the bottom and then scroll back up to the top, and it's like it refreshes some, but it's not like it refreshes at the top or in the bottom. They're all mixed up, and takes forever to try to sort through all of them and get them in the right order. Here's a funny one. There's every once in a while, if I see a video that just makes me chuckle, then I just throw it in here. And I just scrolled past it, so I'll play it now.
Open this up to ice fishing.
Yeah.
While on the surface it sounds good, Sure do.
Then what happens next year? Does someone come back and say, I want an ice shanty
Oh, yeah.
on Hudson Springs Park for X amount of time?
Yeah.
And if you then allow ice fishing with shanties,
Catch more fish.
then that leads to another problem.
Walleye depletion.
Prostitution.
Huh?
We've got the police chief and the police department involved.
Guy, what kind of bait are you using?
Just data points to consider. Open this up.
His fucking face. Oh man, I need to clip this and turn this into a reaction, because something about being extremely online, like getting your brain deep fried by the internet at a young age, it you'll start, at least this is my experience. You guys let me know if you have this as well. You'll actually, when you're responding to someone, like you'll have like an emotional response or like a gut response to what they said, but it will manifest to you as a clip like this. And this is where, like, I think the GIF responses have emerged from, and now people have begun to think in GIF responses. They'll even do it in real life. Like, I'll have my wife will say something, and I want to respond with a GIF, but I can't, obviously, because we're just sitting here talking. Sometimes maybe I'll pull it up and show it to her. But that is one that's just going to be embedded in my brain forever. That, it also is. We're going to talk about the Chevron deference thing. It also is an interesting sort of thing that when you like a feature of bureaucracies is very weird externalities coming out. Like if you allow ice fishing, then you're going to get ice shanties, and if you have ice shanties, then you're going to have prostitution. Which I guess, yeah, that's not a bad point, I guess. But like, imagine just having to. Imagine a system where you have to like think about these things and you're trying to like manage everything top down, and you end up having to deal with such bizarre externalities. We live in a wonderful world. No, John McAfee has not started tweeting again. This is an old tweet of his. I'm gonna have to dig it out of the bookmarks here. But while I've got this one open, actually no, real quick, we'll do the Mark Zuckerberg heel to face turn. We've talked about this on the show before. You know, Peter Thiel being a very seminal figure right now, and Mark Zuckerberg being his, like, I don't know what mentee, is that the right term? His disciple. Disciple seems a little weird. Like, if I call someone my mentor, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself their disciple, but I don't know what the term is. So Zuckerberg being heavily influenced by Peter Thiel, and honestly showing quite a bit of moral fiber in certain ways with his leadership at Facebook, especially managing like major conflicts on the board, and from like an executive perspective, I think there's some impressive stuff that he's done. But also he's like very obviously a cutout. Like he was selected and given Facebook, and what Facebook has become, a front for military intelligence, essentially. But he's made some interesting moves over the last several years. He was once the sort of the paragon of absolute goofy nerd dork, like barely human, essentially a lizard. And then he started practicing Brazilian jiu-jitsu and started rolling regularly. And if you've seen him, like, he's actually not terrible. Like, he's pretty good. He's very athletic. He's very in very good shape, very strong. Then he builds this compound out in the middle of nowhere, speaking of the pole shift, and he's getting into like regenerative agriculture and raising Wagyu beef, and now he's like dressing like a wigger. I don't understand what's happening with him.
I just believe really deeply that the future is not going to be one AI. It's going to be...
So he's dressed like a wigger, and he still looks like a freaking goofball. And when he talks, he's got that very like Silicon Valley kind of very professional HR speak with the little up talk, and but there's something there. There's something that's changing about him.
a lot of AIs with a lot of different people being able to create different things. That's partially why I believe so much in open source, right? Because I don't think that AI technology is a thing that should be kind of hoarded and kind of kept, that like one company gets to use it to build whatever central single product that they're building. I think if you believe that like the best experience of this and the best future is going to be a lot of different AIs and a lot of different experiences, that you want to get it out there in all these ways. So part of that is building tools for creators and for users of the platform to be able to create their own, almost like a UGC type AI situation, all the business stuff. But part of that is the open source thing too, so that way other companies out there can create different things and people can just hack on it themselves and mess around with it. So I guess that's a pretty deep worldview that I have. And I don't know, I find it a pretty big turnoff when people in the tech industry kind of talk about building this one true AI. It's like, it's almost as if they kind of think they're creating God or something. And it's like, it's just, that's not what we're doing. I don't think that's how this plays out.
Fairly nuanced perspective too. It's interesting. Like, if I didn't know anything about him and I just understood he was some guy from that was involved in development of AI, I'd sit and listen to him discuss it. It is interesting. One thing I've noticed is the divide between open sourced and closed source AI, if that's the right way to say it. Basically, the people who want strict AI regulation and the people who want everything left open and free seems to be a pretty good proxy for let's say in very rough terms, Biden support versus Trump support. The people who, like, it's kind of a little bit of a tempest in a teapot. I'm sort of adjacent to the debates going back and forth between the AI needs to be regulated doomers versus the I guess like accelerationist, no, everything needs to be open. And my instinct is to fall on the side of the latter. I think given the regulators that we have right now, I know what regulation means. And regulation basically means do the worst things possible and make sure they're done by the worst people possible and freeze out anybody else. So given that that's what regulation means right now, I definitely don't like the thought of that. But I also recognize that the people who want no regulation, the people who are opposed to regulation, are not all necessarily opposed to it for positive reasons. They might give the ostensible purpose of, everyone should be free to do it, and we just need to democratize the internet and yada yada yada. They'll frame it in that sense, but they're also like, I want to build the Dr. Doom weapon, and I don't want anybody standing in my way. I think from a meta perspective, it is interesting that you can make a valid case, in my opinion, for both sides of that. Like, both sides are the way you get to the end point. Whether you're going to regulate it or not regulate it, you're going to get to the same place. And one side thinks that theirs is the more dangerous, and the other side thinks that theirs is the more dangerous. And I'm kind of like, well, both of them are, like, you guys are both right. This is how I felt when I was, I don't know, this is probably 6 or 7 years ago when Hotep Jesus was doing all the different Bitcoin debates on his platform. And that was where I first started kind of learning any of this. And even now, I'm absolutely a novice. So I'm sitting here I have no preconceived opinion. I'm like, big block guys, make your case to me. Small block guys, make your case to me. I literally have no idea. And I came away from it like thinking they're both right. They're both making the same critique of each other, and they're both right. Like, you guys are both trying to democratize the technology, and in so doing, you're creating like a special elite within it that will disproportionately benefit from it. And that was the thing probably that then led me to James Burnham and Curtis Yarvin and so on. Just kind of recognizing the sort of inevitability of some of these things. I think if you set out to say, "Oh, we're gonna stop AI. We're gonna stop AI from taking over the world," I think if your premise is we're gonna stop AI by like going after AI, and this is a stand-in for any other technology, basically, you you kind of put yourself into like a dialectic trap with it, that you begin, you create a feedback loop between you and the thing that you're fighting that just magnifies it. You're like pouring so much time and attention and energy into stopping the bad thing that you're actually manifesting the bad thing. Whereas if you believe this is the way that things, this is the better option, this is the better opportunity, then just go do that. Don't try to stop the other thing, just go do the thing you think is better. And at the very least, let the chips fall where they may. I think that I'm like both an AI doomer and an AI optimist. I think both sides are correct. And whether you're an AI doomer who wants regulation or an AI doomer who doesn't want regulation, because there are both of those. There's a what's that like a Foursquare thing? There's a specific term for it. Punnett square? Is that what it is? I'm gonna look this up because I don't want to sit and wait for you guys. Punnett square. Yeah, Punnett square. So one of these bad boys. So it's kind of like you have on one wing here, you have so you have the doomers, and then you have the optimists, and then you have the pro-regulation and the anti-regulation. So you wind up with pro-regulation doomers and anti-regulation doomers, and pro-regulation optimists and anti-regulation optimists. And I think all of them are ultimately going to bring about the same outcome. I think no matter which way you go, there's sort of an inevitability to this particular situation. So the people who are fighting against the manifestation of AI demons are going to be participating in creating the manifestation of AI demons. And at the same time, I don't think that there's actually a fundamental truth to it, that it's like a channeling device. Which I suppose if it's a channeling device, does that make it more or less authentic or real? When you're dealing with the idea of like conjuring a spirit, if the means you use to conjure the spirit are artificial, you still conjured the spirit. So it's true whether it's real or fake. Yeah, anyways, I don't think that to me, I find the debate interesting just to observe, because neither side has fully won me over to their perspective on it. But I have noticed that it is a proxy. It's almost a direct proxy for the Trump side versus the Biden side. All of the doomers, the regulators, they all are blue America. And the open source accelerationist, they're all red America. This is the very clear divide that I'm seeing. I don't know if that's the divide. I think there's a pretty good chance of that, given what being a full, like, unregulated AI optimist, like the implications of that in terms of technology and energy and the economic supply chains and stuff downstream of all that. I think that there's a good case to be made that is the dividing line right now, that all other dividing lines emanate out from. I don't know. What do you guys think? So the next one, I'll let's read this thread from Austin Allred on the Chevron decision, and then I got some other stuff to read you guys. All right, so Austin Allred is the CEO of Bloom Tech, which was the name just escaped my mind. It was a code school. It started out as a code school that I'll look it up here real quick. Austin Allred. Will it tell me what the old company was called? You guys have probably heard of it. It just says Bloom Tech. Anyways, it was a pretty cool school, like educational option that I was looking at myself maybe 6 years ago or so, where they would teach you. They had I think there was a 3-month and a 9-month course where they would teach you had a like full stack development, and then they had a job placement part of it, and then they had a stipend aspect to it. They had people who were providing funding for stipends, and then they had ways of it was like if they didn't get you placed in a job by X point in time, then they would refund you or something like that. It was a pretty cool model, and I was looking into it at one point, recommended it to a few friends, and he kind of describes what happened to him in this thread. So I'll just read the thread, but he got the I believe the SEC all the way up his ass. So he says the Supreme Court's Chevron ruling may be the most impactful thing to happen to startups in a long time in ways that people don't realize. A thread. From AP, the court's 6-3 ruling on Friday overturned a 1984 decision colloquially known as Chevron that has instructed lower courts to defer to federal agencies when laws passed by Congress are not crystal clear. In other words, federal agencies could interpret unclear law in any way that they saw fit and simultaneously, quote, hold anyone accountable for any law in the way that they desired. It's a gross overreach of power. I personally spent huge amounts of time working with Congress and on Capitol Hill, as did many others, begging for clarity on how income share agreements, ISAs, should be treated. Many years later, federal agencies came after us, citing the very laws that we were begging for clarity on. Importantly, in some instances, it's never even revealed how to stay within the law. The federal agencies don't have to do that. They just have to say that you broke the law and no explanation is really needed. While we had our preferences with regard to ISAs, we weren't even prescriptive. We just wanted to be given any guidance at all that we could operate under. We would have complied with anything, and we were given nothing. So they're trying to figure out how to set up these income share agreements to remain within the law. But they're going to the people who ostensibly are the ones that this system has constructed to be the lawmakers, which is the agencies themselves. So the laws have been written in such a way as to be vague and ambiguous and allow for interpretation by the experts, by the agencies. The agencies are not formally lawmakers, but they're effectively lawmakers, which means they can choose to pull whichever one of those cards they want in a given instance. If you're coming and you're saying, please give us guidance so that you don't have to come fine us and justify your existence, and they're saying, oh, no, we're not the lawmakers. Sorry, nothing. We can't tell you that. Go to Congress. And Congress says, go to the agencies. And agencies say, go to Congress. The Congress says, go to the agencies. This is the system working as it's designed. So they're like, okay, well, we have our business model. We need to move forward with it. So we're going to make our best guess and do the thing that, get legal consultation. Whatever you guys will tell us, we'll incorporate that and do what we think is best, both for us and with remaining within the law. And then those agencies turn around and they say, hey, remember those things you were asking us? Yeah, it turns out here's the answer and you're guilty of violating them. It should be very obvious why this sort of system would arise and what sort of institutional inertia there would be for maintaining it. It was kept intentionally vague with no answers to be given up until and including the point where various federal agencies went after everyone in the ISA space for things we had begged for answers for. It bankrupted nearly everyone other than Bloomtech. We see the same thing in crypto. The SEC continues to go after Coinbase and other players whose giant legal teams are doing everything they possibly can to stay within the law. The SEC over and over again says, you're breaking the law. Then when Coinbase asks for clarification, they get none. The result is a kangaroo court and many millions of dollars spent on legal fees without any clarity whatsoever, and agencies who are given full power to simultaneously make up what the gray area in between the law ought to be and go after companies for it. They do this while citing Uber and Theranos, claiming that companies are trying to be above the law and skirt regulation. Oftentimes, the exact opposite is true. Companies are trying very hard to know how to stay within regulatory guidelines, but no one tells them. There's only two ways to fight this. Well, until yesterday/today. An outrageously expensive court battle that will take years or decades and not come to a conclusion. The other was to settle with federal agencies and let them say whatever they want to in press releases, which is what he wound up doing. And he's taken a significant amount of shit for it because, like he says here, at the bottom, of course, they'll have a disclosure that none of those things have been decided by any court or are agreed upon by anyone, but they can spout off as if they're factually true and no one cares enough to go in deep and question. All in all, while I wasn't fast enough to save many of the companies I've worked with from massive abuses of power by the federal government, I'll have a Diet Coke tonight in honor of the fact that the world just became ever so slightly more just. So this is another interesting situation where there's two perspectives on this, and they're both arguing it out with each other. And in a sense, I think they're both right. The one perspective says, so judges aren't elected either. So you're going to defer the decision-making process to a judge. Who appointed that judge? What's their record? Like an unelected judge versus an unelected bureaucrat. Now, I personally would prefer the unelected judge probably, unless you have the one situation where it affects you personally and it happens to be one of the judges that doesn't work out. You're kind of like, before you're actually in the situation, you're like, well, on average, it'll probably work out for me, so I would prefer this to that. It's more likely I'll run into an issue on this side than I do on that side. But if you do run into an issue on the judge side, then you're utterly fucked. So viewing this sort of thing as like, we got this thing done and that's a panacea and the problem will be solved, is foolishness. The only way, ostensibly the argument is that what this will do is it will force Congress to have to legislate more narrowly. Well, that's not objectively a good thing necessarily either. There is no one single solution that you just find, this bad piece of law or this bad precedent, we need to just pluck this thing out, remove that particular bureaucracy, and everything will be better. Get this person out and replace them with someone else, and that thing will be better. None of these things are living in the real world. There is no get one big move and fix everything. And that doesn't mean, there's nothing we can do then. No, it means like you have to be in it for the long haul. If you want to care about this sort of thing and be invested in it and strive for creating or supporting solutions for it, you have to be willing to play the long game. By definition, that's the only thing that's going to be possible. So you could see with this sort of ruling, the fact that the ruling, I think what's most important is that the ruling is being made and it's drawing this thing out and making everybody look at it. And it's bringing this sort of thing in reality. I think in the short term, being able to contest fines and overreach by agencies that are acting explicitly malevolently, like having a basis upon which to contest that and try to move things forward is going to help a lot of people. And I think that's a good thing for that reason. But it's also not going to be a panacea, and it requires continually pressing for more. Okay, so I've got some stuff here on, we'll do the McDonald's ice cream cone thing a little bit later, but I've got a couple of good articles, one written in Revolver about how, this is from March, it says the left has to replace Biden, here's why they can't. And then an article from Bennett's Phylactery from a couple days ago, he said the regime can't unseat a drooling geriatric to save its own ass, and you're blackpilling? So we're going to read those here in a little bit, but first I wanted to show you this tweet from John McAfee. So this was tweeted in July of 2020. So election year, hotly contested, Biden versus Trump, July of 2020. He says, Russia's first time traveler has returned. Guess what he said? In September, Biden is medically diagnosed as unfit for office and quits. They discover that the DNC has legal power to choose a replacement without a national vote. Weird, huh? You'll never guess who they chose. So everybody was when this didn't happen in 2020, everyone was like, just crazy old McAfee being crazy McAfee. But what if he was talking about 2024? This seems much more plausible for 2024. And it's also likely just a huge coincidence. But if it's not, if this actually happens, then you better believe that I'm not going to acknowledge that it could be a coincidence. He called it. So on that subject, there were a couple of interesting tweets that came out here in the last couple of days. One this morning from Tucker Carlson. And, here, I have another Tucker Carlson thing to watch in a little bit. So, before the Tucker Carlson one, I'll just show you this one. Sorry, guys, I told you this was going to be a little chaotic today. David Sachs, PayPal mafioso himself, says, wait, what? MSM is now just flat out admitting that the American presidency is the front for an oligarchy. Here's an Axios headline. Behind the curtain, Biden oligarchy will decide fate. And then here's another one. Michael Tracy says, I swear to God, I thought this was a parody. It's not. It's from a CNN straight news report. Quoting, a debate watch party in Los Angeles on Thursday night happened to feature Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, that's Kamala Harris, Pritzker, Whitmer, so that'd be J.B. Pritzker, Gretchen Whitmer, and Bashir. I can't remember. Is it Todd Bashir? There were other high-profile attendees. By a few answers in, Rob Reiner was screaming about losing, and Jane Fonda had tears in her eyes, according to people in the living room. A room full of just the worst human beings on the planet. Now, what's interesting is this sort of thing is being leaked. So, who's leaking this, and why? I've been saying for a long time that the regime, the coalition that makes up the regime, has been fracturing. And now those fractures are breaking out into the clear open. All these foxes are nipping at each other's heels. There's a clear power struggle going on. And whoever, it would take an absolute miracle for any individual member of that coalition to be able to rally together all of the troops, because they all have such different agendas. They all have such different things that they value. And ultimately, what a lot of them want is stability and security because they want to protect their own wealth. And they want to save face. They want to appear credible and dignified and decent. And the media is becoming a complete laughingstock. The thing that used to be their reliable mouthpiece that would ensure that their reputations were always maintained, that thing is descending into madness. And now they're starting to weaponize it against each other. This is a tale as old as time. Having a bloated imperial apparatus descending into backroom backstabbings and squabbling, and when it breaks out into the mainstream like this, there are no adults in the room that are settling it. It's just getting real petty and snarky, not presenting any sort of cohesive unity or anything like that. This is a coalition that is not capable of governing, which has, in and of itself, as that realization dawns on each other, it spurs even more defection from the coalition. The rifts get deeper and deeper. So, Tucker Carlson tweeted, from an unusually good source, Obama's tweet supporting Joe Biden was disingenuous. In private, Obama is telling people Biden can't win, and he is therefore in favor of an open convention. Obama will not say whom he supports, nor as of yesterday afternoon had he met personally with Biden to deliver the message. Relations between the Obamas and the Bidens have never been warm. At times, they've been hostile. There's a quote attributed to Obama that I've never actually seen if it verified or anything, but I've seen it attributed to him so much that I think it's real. That Obama said, never underestimate Joe's ability to fuck everything up. At times they've been hostile, but recently they've deteriorated further, mostly due to Jill Biden. In the hours and days after the debate, she kept her husband cloistered away from anyone who might convince him to drop out. Jill Biden is the driving force behind her husband's re-election campaign, just as she was in 2020, when other members of the family, including Biden's sister Val, considered him too impaired to run. The next generation of potential Democratic candidates understands all this as an opportunity, and they're circling, particularly Gretchen Whitmer, who is promoting herself aggressively. Now, obviously, he's got a lot of motivations to throw a stick in the spokes. And we'll come back to Tucker here in a few minutes. But whatever his motivations are for, oh my God, Facebook is the worst thing on the planet. The less I use it, the more notifications it sends me. I finally deleted the frickin' app off my phone because I was so tired of getting notifications. I've turned notifications off and they're still sending them to me. I turned it off on my phone. So what does it do now? Now it's sending me notifications through Chrome. I'm gonna have to go log out. Like, just log out everywhere. I might just delete my account. I don't want to because I've got like a lot of old pictures of Eastwood and Amy and I met on Facebook, so there's a lot of the original posts and stuff that we sent to each other. So I don't want to delete it, but my God, is it a retarded app. Facebook and Instagram are both terrible. People complain about Twitter, but Twitter's at least functional. It's impossible to use Facebook and Instagram. The feed's constantly jumping all around, and it'll send you a notification, and you click the notification, it goes to nowhere. Or my favorite thing, I'm looking at Reels, and it says, so your friend commented. So oh, cool, I want to see what he said. Click the comment. Oh, nothing here, just a wall of comments. I got to go scroll through every single one. Nope, nowhere to be found. And it turns out he replied to some reply deep down nested in somewhere, but it doesn't bother to show it to me. It just says, hey, he commented on this. Huh. Well, if you're going to tell me he commented on it, I'd like to see what he said. How are these apps this poorly run? How are these people this retarded? And I'm supposed to be black-pilled and fear these people? Ugh. Okay. Facebook rant over. I think it'll actually make more sense for me to play this Tucker Carlson clip here now, and then I'll read the other pieces that I have. Because while we're talking about Tucker, there's an interesting thing that he talks about in here, and I listened to this the other day. Got to go to 1.5x. Apologies to those of you who don't like the 1.5. Good friend of the show, Josh Ham, pointed out something about the way that Tucker talks about democracy in this. It's framed in the very naive sort of boomer-like view that Tucker has. Very dedicated to the ideals of the founding of the country and yada, yada, yada. But I think there's something very pure in that naivete. And I think it's valuable to keep around. But there's a little bit of a twist to the way he talks about in this, which is interesting considering all the other things he's been talking about lately and how influential he is. So here, I'll just play this and then we'll talk about it.
But I watched CNN today, and they had the presidential debate, the U.S. presidential debate. And maybe some of you saw it. And if you did, well, it was amazing. It was amazing on every level. But what was especially amazing was afterward, they went to the panel of assembled Democratic operatives posing as journalists, and all of them were shocked to discover that Joe Biden has dementia. They couldn't believe it.
One of the things I appreciate about Tucker is stripping all political analysis and partisanship and stuff out of it and just viewing him as a person. I love the way that he uses words. I love his wit. He's incredibly incisive. The dude's noggin is firing at 150% of capacity. If you listen to his long form stuff, he has an extremely colorful world between his ears. I like people like that. I like people who I don't really care what their opinions are. I don't care whether I agree with them or not. I just like listening to the way that their mind attacks the world around it. And the way the smugness with which he just eviscerates the CNN and MSNBC panelists, Democrat operatives.
What? Oh my gosh! He's non-compass menace! No way! Are you serious? And I'm thinking to myself, what year is it? 2024-ish? Middle-aged people identify with that? Okay, 2024, people are saying. It was 2019 that I heard from a friend of mine who's friends with his sister, Val, that the family was very upset because Joe has dementia and he's running for president. And
so I don't know if I've heard anybody actually report this before, but members of Biden's family believed he had dementia 5 years ago. I have a video in here. I don't know if I will be able to find it. I don't remember if I saved it or not, but it compared Biden debating in 2020 and Biden debating in 2024, and the drop-off is stark. And 2020, compared to now, in 2020, he was actually pretty coherent. He was old, obviously, but he was pretty coherent. That must have been back when the Adderall would stave off the dementia effects or whatever else he's being treated with. I probably don't want to know. But now, the difference is just absolutely stark. So if he had dementia 5 years ago, it's the idea people joke about Weekend at Bernie's, he may literally be dead.
well, I said this on TV, by the way, at the time, and it was denounced as a racist or something. I mean, everything in the United States, that's just the all-purpose term for shut up. Racist. It's I think he's white. Shut up, racist. Okay. Anyway, but But his sister had told a friend of mine, like,
This is the proper demeanor to have to those people. Not to get angry at them, just to be like, you fucking idiot. Okay, yeah, right, just mock them. Mock and humiliate them.
actual friend of mine, one of my neighbors, that the family was upset and that his son sadly had passed away. By the way, not in Iraq fighting a war for freedom, but of cancer. I don't think he's aware of that. But it's sad. And that the family was convinced he needed to kind of get it out of his system by running for president. But of course, no one's going to make Joe Biden the nominee because we had Pete Buttigieg for that. Who's, now it's a joke. But at the time, they're like, people are going to love Pete Buttigieg. He's incompetent, but he's gay. Great. And then people were like, what? No. So they had to go to Joe Biden, and he actually became the nominee and then somehow became the president. But it was obvious the whole time that he had no idea where he was and that it was cruel.
Oh, this is interesting. I haven't seen this yet. Koala Bear says, good time to mention Mike Ben's, quote, where is the letter from the security agency heads? That's a very interesting thought. I assume I assume the context here is Biden and his incompetence. So where are the security agencies weighing in on it one way or the other? That is very interesting. I've had a number of different things that have been sent and told to me recently about there being I mentioned this on the stream last night with Meta Prime, but I've heard a number of things about the Yarvin's old formulation of Red America and Blue America, where Red America is basically the State Department and the federal agencies and Department of Education and like everything extending out from there. And Red America is like the Defense Department and the intel agencies and everything extending out from there. And from what I've heard, I've been operating for a long time under the presumption that there basically is no Red America within official government structures anymore. But some of the stuff that I've heard recently indicates that there may be more to it than I realized. That there's actually, as we've been living through it, it seemed like the government is kind of just, especially the national security, foreign policy wing of it, is just completely unconstrained. But there's a lot of evidence that it's actually been a hot battlefront where the State Department is trying to pick fights that the Defense Department wants nothing to do with. And the Defense Department is trying to figure out how to manage this. And I'm speaking very broadly. I'm not saying these are like matters of formal policy or that every single person in every one of these bureaucracies falls cleanly on one side or the other. But there's much more pushback from within the more Red America sectors of the government than I may have realized. From what I can make out, I think the CIA is virtually completely Blue America. But it's also not entirely Blue America. And then once you get into the Pentagon, things are much more there is much more hostility to the State Department and the executive branch and everything else than I think we've been led to believe. So the security agency heads, no letter from them. That's very interesting. I'll have to ponder on that, what the actual implications of that is.
And that his grasping, horrible wife, who like poses as a doctor, was pushing this so she could go to state dinners. And everyone knew this. Like, there's not one person who didn't know this. And when you travel outside our borders, people are always so nice about other people's countries. Like, they don't attack you to your face. And obviously, I'm the most American person who's ever lived, and I love my country, and I'm going to die there, and would die for it without even thinking. That's how much I mean that. So everyone wants to be polite to you about your country. And when, like, if I ever went to New Zealand, I wouldn't.
When he says this sort of thing, it's kind of weird because most people don't talk about that way and talk about things like that, and they don't talk about it that way. Just kind of sort of just making the observation and then just moving on. But after listening to hours and hours of him talking like long form, you could tell it's authentic. You could tell it's sincere, that this is him. I've done interviews where I'm talking for 3 hours nonstop with someone. And if someone who hasn't done that may not appreciate the level of absolute degaff candor that can come out from you by that point. It's very hard to stay in character for really long interviews. So when someone's doing it over and over and over and over again, and they're on other people's territory and responding in real time to stuff people are bringing up, then yeah, like Tucker's issue, if anything, is that he's too naive and pie in the sky about various institutions still within America. Him being, I think it's kind of silly to think of him being an op. Him being like an agent of some type. He grew up in that world, but he's much. I don't think he could lie very well. He can't help himself. Stuff just comes just bubbling out of him, and he has no control over it. He would make a very poor, I don't know, agent.
Mention Jacinda Ardern, or you know what I mean? That would be rude. I wouldn't say like, oh, that retarded girl with the teeth, is she here? You know, I wouldn't. That would be, no, I wouldn't. Because that's not something a guest says, right? You're in someone else's, you're having dinner at someone's house, like the food is appalling. What's so good? You know what I mean? But even given the high standards of politeness offered to foreigners in foreign lands, everywhere I've traveled around the world for the past 4 years, and I've spent a lot of countries, people are like, so Joe Biden, how is he? You're like, well, I think he has dementia. He certainly does. Like everybody knows, because they have, I can't remember, the internet. And it has video on it, and it takes about 15 seconds to determine the leader of the most powerful country in the world with this mass nuclear arsenal involved in 2 simultaneous wars doesn't know what day it is. And that's really scary.
You know, it just struck me what Tucker is. He's like the absolute essence of waspness. Like New Englander aristocracy, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Like he is the absolute distilled essence of that, and he believes in that. That is his culture. He wants that culture to persist. He loves it for all of its foibles. He's like, this is me. This is my people. This is my culture. I'm going to go down with it. If it's going down, I'm going down with it, and I'm going to love it every way, every step of the way. And what's funny is I think the people who are hostile to him are the people who are hostile to him from the right are actually, what they don't like is that he's a WASP. They have like a gut reaction against the New Englander WASP personality. Whether it's because they're Southern and they just see a Yankee and they can't stand the Yankee, or if they're like a West Coast person who has contempt for the Northeasterner. But he is, if there's anybody who stands for what could be like the personality of America, it would be Tucker Carlson. CB says, Tucker is walking the American who believed the same way to his same conclusions, and it's a good thing. Yes. Yes, absolutely. Nice guy nationalism. I like that. Mellon says, Pentagon, probably the only reason we aren't in World War III. Yes. Once upon a time, I would have thought that was preposterous, but I'm becoming less and less inclined that way. Koala Bear says, if WashPo is the State Department, then state faction wants Biden? Yes. Yes. The State Department faction wants Biden. Then there are other members of the elite Democrat donor class who don't want anything to do with him. Because they're the ones who don't live fully in this Tucker world, like the DC Capitol Hill world. Those people who are there, they want Biden because he represents them. Like, if he goes, they go. Then they got to fend for themselves. But there are other wealthy, influential members of the Democrat ruling coalition who do not want him. So now they're having to do battle with like department heads and staffers and stuff that they put in place. You could probably imagine how that's going to go. Where I think that we're watching, it's going to be very hard for the Democrat Party as an institution to actually maintain legitimacy for a long time going forward. I think there's going to be such a stark regime flight away from it that they're going to end up going down with the ship that is Joe Biden. And people are not going to want to be affiliated with that. We've seen political parties disappear altogether. And even if the Democrats don't disappear altogether, I think that the Republican Party is becoming the mainstream party. It's becoming the inner party. And the Democrat Party loyalists are being moved into the outer party. I don't think this means yay based world. I think it means some good things. It also means some bad things because we're seeing the Republican Party is being pulled to the center, but that center is also moving rightward at the same time. So on net, I think there'll be good things that come of it. There'll also be bad things. But I do think that we're seeing the death of the Democratic Party for at least a couple of election cycles. David Nettie says, would the Federal Reserve be Red America because of Jerome Powell? Yes. Yes. This is essentially, in very broad strokes, the picture that's starting to form in my mind is Silicon Valley, the venture capital world, with the Project 2025 and the Pentagon, and then the commercial and investment banking world in America, which I would consider the Fed part of that. I think those are this is the coalition that's forming behind Trump. So the real question is going to be, do our guys who have insinuated themselves into Trump's inner circles much more this time around than before, do they have the cojones and the deal-making chops and the willpower to maintain their position in that inner circle? That's going to be the big question, is to what extent does Project 2025 become sidelined, and to what extent can it maintain within that inner circle? And I think there's a lot of reasons why significant portions of it are going to be maintained within the inner circle because of the emphasis on both immigration and deregulation. I think those things are going to keep, and then probably trade policy, those things are going to keep a lot of the Project 2025 guys insinuated into the inner circle. Okay. Are there any other... If the Justice Department concluded Biden couldn't be prosecuted for the documents case, then the media and security agencies knew about his mental state. Yeah, they already said that he couldn't be prosecuted from it because of how bad he was. Tucker strikes me as an extremely honest dude. Yes, he's almost too honest. Loss of Chevron deference will decimate departmental budgets, shrinking the size of government because staff is the first to go. I think it will shrink the size of government in terms of personnel, but it may not shrink the size of government in terms of policy. That remains to be seen. But there's definitely an opportunity for it. I also don't think that... I think shrinking the size of government in terms of personnel is a very good thing. I think if you're talking size in that sense, then yeah, I agree. I don't think shrinking the size of government in terms of power is a good thing, because that also means increasing attack surface for chaos and disorder, which becomes a pretext for expanding personnel. You need to keep a small but powerful government. The size in terms of personnel needs to be small, but the power needs to be large. Because as that power begins to diminish, it creates opportunities for the personnel to expand. Should probably do something with papal orthodoxy on Twitter, formerly known as Popular Liberty. His theory of archetropism and his laws of archetropism, that would be an interesting thing to reboot. I'm going to do that in the future. All right, let's get back to the Tucker video here.
But if you come to the United States and you're in the media envelope, this fake world created by this disinformation specialists who run our media, that's never mentioned at all. It's everyone pretend. It would literally be like everyone pretending Jacinda Ardern is a legitimate person, which they may have done in New Zealand. I wasn't there. You know what I mean? Where people say, "Oh, it's the prime minister." What? It's ridiculous, actually. But everyone sort of plays along like it's not happening. And this is the whole Emperor's New Clothes story is based on this phenomenon, which is a human phenomenon. But for the media today to be like, "Wow, we just got the diagnosis. This is shocking. He can't run for president." Kind of either they're really stupid, too stupid to breathe unaided, or they're liars. They're truly dishonest. They're hiding the obvious from you. And I'm betting on the latter. But even more amazing was the response to that. So remember that our media are not just observers of reality or describers of reality, people who bring you the story.
That point there was very good. Too stupid to breathe unaided. Again, you guys know me. I'm sure you could predict this. I think both are true. I think they are both too stupid to breathe unaided, and also they're malevolent and they're lying. I think that they're exceptional at operating within their own little microculture. Their whole world revolves around Capitol Hill and all the different federal agencies and the newsrooms and airports and moving back and forth between all of them and posting on the internet, and they're very fluent, and they have a lot of expertise operating within that world. But that world itself is being dragged away from the real world. So there comes a point where being really, really good at operating in this world that's this far departed from reality means you're actually now accelerating your derangement. You're getting more and more deranged expertly. So I think they are lying, but first and foremost, they're lying to themselves, and they're exceptionally good at lying to themselves because their entire modus operandi is maintaining this fiction of this fake world that they live in. And they've persuaded the vast majority of everyone else to take them seriously and be like, okay, well, we kind of have to live in that fake world as well. But all it takes is a few significant people to start being like, I'm not going to live in that fake world. And look at this, I'm having success. And I'm gaining power and prestige, not living in that world. Before the illusion, the fiction starts to fall apart. And once the fiction begins to fall apart, you can't just put it back together again. Like you might be able to throw some duct tape on it or something and drag it forward another cycle. But these things happen slowly and then all at once. And it sure seems like the all at once is coming quick. Oh, this is good, CB. The Eric Prince model. Fewer McDonald's locations, but the ice cream machines always work. Oh, that is a banger. That's going to stick with me. Thank you for that. Let's see. Mellon says, at chat, have you guys encountered that S2 Underground guy here on YouTube? His radio framework will be important soon, I feel. Good for sending basic news messages to other Anons in case of an emergency. No, I haven't seen him. Drop a link. I'll check him out.
Story, first on the scene. No, they're the gatekeepers to reality. You don't know what the world looks like except through them. Like they are the pipeline through which all information flows. In the United States, they're political actors. They work for a political party, in effect, if not officially. They all work for the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party, and I think this is probably true here, has one mission this season, which is to save democracy, which is gravely in peril, you may have heard, by Vladimir Putin, who is ending our democracy, somehow. And don't laugh.
Here's the part where he's starting to get into his interesting comments on democracy. Note, see if you can pick out the theme that I'm going to highlight here.
What are you Putin lovers? Anyway, yeah, okay. That's fine, I don't care. It's not my president. You can love anyone you want, as far as I'm concerned, because I believe in, the autonomy of man. You can have your own opinions. But the point is, in my country, and probably here, the self-described mission of everyone in the media is to save democracy, and democracy, simply defined, is the idea that the people own their country. It's their country, and they hire people to represent them. But fundamentally, they are shareholders in this enterprise. They're owners. They're not serfs. They're not renting it. This isn't a rental car. It's your car. You change the oil in it because it belongs to you. Right? And that's what citizenship is. And so in a democracy, you don't have to do everything the majority wants every moment, but over time, if what you're doing bears no relationship to what the majority wants, then you know for a fact it's not democracy. And you can try to convince people of things. You can say, well, you want this, but I think you should want that, and here's why. But you can't ignore them, or else it's not a democracy. It's an oligarchy. And you see yourself as the owner, and they're the tenants, the serfs, the renters, and you can just do whatever you want. It doesn't matter what they think.
As Buck Johnson says, Yarvin pilled Tucker. This is very interesting. Hearing Tucker talking about democracy, meaning you are an owner in the enterprise. You are an owner in the government. That the government is your hire, the group that you have hired to apply your ownership. It's very interesting. Citizens as shareholders. I do think that these sorts of things are so true that they're bigger than the individual people and the individual schemes that groups of people can concoct. I think that we are moving in that direction, whether people want to or not. Like, it's just, there's an inevitability to it because it is so real. You're not going to put the democracy thing back into, you're not going to put democracy away. Democracy isn't going anywhere. Whatever the next thing is, it's going to be some form of democracy. And probably the thing after it, and probably the thing after that. The idea of democracy has way too much sticking power or staying power. It's too sticky. That was what I was looking to say. The idea of democracy is too sticky to just kind of fade away. What we're going to see is a reinvention of democracy, and we're watching it happen in real time. This is what Bukele was talking about, managing your democracy. Your democracy has to be maintained. Why does it have to be maintained? Because what democracy means is the people are the owners of the country. They are the shareholders in the government. and the government needs to operate efficiently and for the benefit of its shareholders. And citizenship matters. Being a citizen means being a shareholder, being an owner in the enterprise. And we can't just let anybody be an owner in the enterprise because we want the enterprise to operate efficiently. The democracy must be regularly maintained and managed. So we're seeing a rising war against the concept of oligarchy. If you understand the iron law of oligarchy, you know that the oligarchy we have now is going to be replaced by a different oligarchy. But that different oligarchy is going to operate according to a different political formula than the current one. That new oligarchy is going to be much more, it's going to be a high-low split among a different set of demographics. And Blue America is becoming the outer party. Blue America and its ideals are being co-opted and used against it.
So that's the most anti-democratic attitude possible, right? That attitude is the enemy of democracy. And all of a sudden today, these defenders of democracy are like, well, I mean, obviously Joe Biden's got Alzheimer's, and he's super unpopular, he can't win, therefore we need to replace him. And it's like, wait a second, he was already elected in the biggest landslide ever. I don't know if you knew that. Like, he got over 1 billion votes, in our country. He got more votes than Black Jesus. And because he's just so unbelievably popular, people just love Joe Biden. It was a landslide, literally a landslide in 2020. And that gives him the authority to do whatever he wants, whether you like it or not, because so many of your neighbors voted for him, you don't know their names. But it happened, okay? It happened. It's sort of like COVID deaths. You never actually met anybody who died of it, but millions did die. Everybody voted for Joe Biden except you, so shut up. So he has this mandate, this moral mandate to do literally whatever he wants, import 30 million people illegally, and you're not allowed to say anything about it, racist. And yet at the same time, and then Democratic primary voters, just like the other day in our system, the members of the party vote for their nominee. He's elected by his own party. People actually went to the polls and cast a ballot for him. But all of a sudden, because he might not win against the orange man, we need to take his job away from him by force and let the donors put someone in there who can beat the orange man, because that's democracy. And that made me start to think for the first time, maybe we're defining the word democracy a little differently. Maybe you've got a different understanding of what that means. Maybe you think democracy is when we do exactly what you and 8 of your friends want. That's what you think it is. Whereas I think democracy is when you do the will of the majority over time.
That is an incredibly powerful political formula. And especially in the current age, there is mass demand for someone making this observation. Do with that what you will, but this is not just the peanut gallery. We're seeing what's coming down the line. We're seeing what the mainstream is. Okay, so, and what was interesting is Elon Musk. This is where I saw this. Elon Musk makes a good point about democracy. Huh. Interesting. All right. So I want to see real quick that I'm not getting viewership updates from Twitter, but it says I'm streaming to Twitter. And I am streaming to Twitter, but something's busted in Restream. So, okay, good. Just wanted to make sure that I was actually on Twitter right now. All right. Let me scroll through the bookmarks here again real quick and see if there was any other little things I wanted to highlight before I read a couple of these pieces to you. Here's one. Scott Pressler. He says, am I too nice? So Scott Pressler's a very interesting guy. I've been watching him for a little while. He's a good ground game guy. He's like gets teams of people and goes into cities and like cleans up neighborhoods and does door knocking and all that sort of thing. And he says, President Trump, he made us very proud last night. I'm hearing reports of Democrats, blah, 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 something about them panicking. This guy, this chick, Miko, panicking. So what? Won't change our minds. We will not vote for a convicted felon, period. We are not stupid or gullible, Scott. Only you maggots are. Now, when I see someone posting like this, I just don't reply to them at all. But this here is, I don't think people appreciate the power in this kind of response. He says, even though you call me a maggot, I want to make it clear that when Trump wins, we won't hold that against you. We will still work to put all Americans first. Have a good weekend, lovely. Being able to respond like this is a superpower. Whether or not you actually believe it, having the grace to respond that way, I think is really good. This is another Josh Ham. He sent this one over to me and he said, this is the right spirit to have. More commentary on the journalist.
Now, the thing that a lot of traditional journalists don't like is they don't like being put on the same platform as the average citizen. They don't like their voice being the same. They're pretty mad about that. I think it's very important to elevate citizen journalism. I think it's very important to hear the voice of the people, the actual voice of the people, not the filtered voice of the people. And let the people choose the narrative, and let the people determine the truth, and not 5 editors-in-chiefs of major publications. Do you want to know what's really going on, or do you want their opinion? You know, it's a handful of people. I think we want to know the voice of the people, the true voice of the people. Another thing.
Some more similar thoughts. Were there any other? Oh, it's gonna update on me again. All right. Well, you guys are getting a little preview of some of the other things that I've saved in here, but I don't see any of the other stories I immediately wanted to address. So we're going to go over and read these articles. First one from Revolver. The left has to replace Biden. Here's why they can't. Now, this was published in March of 2024. Elon's video is kind of quiet. Oh, sorry, man. I'll retweet it, and then you can go watch it on Twitter there. There, I just retweeted it. Okay, so a lot of people are saying, "Oh, they're just gonna plug in, candidate so and so, and just move on as business as usual." Yeah, the trash bag. Here's why that is not as easy as it might sound. It's taken almost as a given. Sure, Joe Biden might be clueless, senile, gruesomely unpopular, and at death's door. Sure, he might be way down in the polls against Donald Trump, trailing like he never did at any point in 2020. Sure, his presidency might look doomed. But Americans can't really look forward to Biden's well-earned defeat in a 2024 rematch with Trump for one simple reason. Because they won't let him actually be the Democratic nominee come November. They? Yes, they. You know, the cabal that lurks behind the Democratic Party, setting its agenda and coordinating all its acts to give the superficial appearance of popular democracy when in fact a tiny elite is very much in control. Those people. Podcaster Joe Rogan said what millions of ordinary Americans were quietly thinking 2 weeks ago when he predicted an imminent switcheroo in favor of Gavin Newsom. Play this.
Basically, you can't prosecute this guy because he's not compos mentis, but you can let him run for the president of the United States in November. So that's the world that we've managed to get into.
But don't you think that that's a ruse?
What do you mean?
Him running for president? I think
you don't think he's going to run?
No. I think they're going to get rid of him. I think they're going to move him out. They're going to force him to step down. That's what I think. If I had to guess, and it's just speculation, I'd say they're setting up Gavin Newsom for it. That's what I say. That's what I think. That's what it looks like to me. I think more and more comes out about this stuff, and more comes out about the Burisma thing and the Penn State thing, where the Chinese donated money to Penn State, and then he got $1 million a year gig where he didn't even have to show up. That's old school. That's like mafia stuff. Was it $1 million a year? How much was it that he got from Penn State? And he was telling people he's a professor at Penn State. Like he's never even.
There's no fewer than 4 theys in that minute-long clip. They will remove Biden, and they will install Gavin Newsom in his place. On the night of Super Tuesday, Vivek Ramaswamy, a Revolver favorite, argued that they are preparing to shove Biden aside after tricking Republicans into fixating on Biden's particular failures instead of offering an agenda independent of Biden. And I'm not going to play this video from Vivek because I want to read through all these. We're already at 1 hour and 15. A few weeks ago, Nikki Haley, who recently suspended her campaign, publicly predicted that Joe Biden would vanish off the 2024 ticket right about now. Haley predicts Biden will not be the Democratic nominee in 30 days. We all saw he didn't want to do the interview tonight before the Super Bowl. I wish him well, I do, but this is serious. My bet is 30 days from now, I don't think Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. And it is not just Republicans entertaining such thoughts. There are increasing indications of very public buyer's remorse within the American left. Instead of trying to smear special counsel Robert Hur and debunk his report highlighting Biden's cognitive decline, the press treated it as a huge story, with the New York Times all but saying Biden should step aside and commissioning polls that show voters feel the same way. In Washington, the night of Her's report, Biden held an impromptu press conference so disastrous and so avoidable that one has to wonder if somebody on his staff tricked him into it in the hopes it would ruin him. According to a Rasmussen survey at the end of February, nearly half of the public thinks Biden will be out by next November, with Michelle Obama the most popular choice to replace him. It's all a tempting thing to believe, not because it's an attractive prospect in its own right, but because it would at least suggest the world makes sense. After all, how could a serious nation be led by an octogenarian with such a manifestly degraded mental condition as to be deemed, like a child, to be cognitively incapable of criminal responsibility? The lamentable truth of it all, of course, is that we are not a serious nation. But wouldn't a joke nation such as ours, precisely because it has become a joke, at least want a serious-looking figurehead? There is indeed something uncomfortably and improbably honest about the flagrant consonance between the inner and outer appearance of our corroded body politic. At any rate, the implicit expectation of those cited above is that they, that is, the establishment, will simply get rid of Biden. On a surface level, it would appear that the system is not only the motive, but also the means. Recall the remarkable swiftness and efficiency with which the Democrat machine effected a consolidation around Joe Biden in the 2020 Democrat primary. Biden, a two-time failed candidate, took fourth in Iowa and a humiliating fifth in New Hampshire. In Nevada, he finished second, but also lost to Bernie Sanders by more than 20 points. But suddenly, after a win in South Carolina, everything almost magically fell into place. Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar dropped out abruptly and endorsed Biden. The party establishment rallied to him, and suddenly Biden was the overwhelming favorite who proceeded to crush Sanders for the nomination. In 2020, they, Democrat movers and shakers operating behind the scenes, anointed Biden. So surely they could do it again, right? Not so fast. The forces that were able to manipulate the Democratic Party so effectively 4 years ago have lost their edge in 2024, and whatever hope the party had of replacing Biden has actually been squandered through sheer cowardice and inaction. Simply put, the Democrats have sleepwalked into a disastrous position in which they can't live with Biden and can't get rid of him, at least until he dies or voluntarily steps aside. Otherwise, the regime is stuck with the old man. All jokes about they aside, who actually is the they that people imagine removing Biden? Some imagine an omniscient but invisible force guiding all of politics, but the truth is more mundane. Politics really is a world where many different interest groups battle it out for influence. Sometimes it's public, sometimes it's private, but almost always it's messy. Sometimes savvy billionaires can call the shots. More often, they find ways to embarrass themselves and squander a lot of money. Michael Bloomberg blew $500 million to buy Kirk Douglas's last words and win 51 delegates. So if Joe Biden is going to be yanked off the ballot in favor of somebody else, some person or some group of anti-Trump political influencers needs to make it happen. Let Revolver succinctly lay out some options, both real and fanciful. First, a late primary entrant swoops in to steal the nomination. Nope. Besides the fact that several states have already held primary votes, the deadline to put new candidates on the ballot has already passed in the vast majority of states. As of this writing, just 6 states plus DC. Now remember, this is in March, so this is 4 months ago. As of this writing, just 6 states plus DC still allow a candidate to get on the ballot. By the time you read this, it may have dwindled further. Needless to say, even a 100% sweep of those states wouldn't be enough for some surprise candidate to get the nomination. Even a candidate mounting a write-in campaign at this point would find it functionally impossible to get 50% of delegates, even if we hand-waved away the difficult task of actually winning over Democrat primary voters. Under the existing political rules, as laid out in the DNC's bylaws, the calculus is simple. Biden is guaranteed to have a majority of delegates in the Democrat primary process, and under DNC rules, those delegates are required to vote for him at the party convention. Under existing rules, he will be the nominee. That leads to option 2. The DNC something something. Okay, so nobody else is snatching the nomination under the current rules. But political parties aren't the government. They can actually rewrite rules on the fly, and that includes changing how a party picks its nominee. To attentive political observers, then, it may seem like the DNC is the obvious place to put in the fix. Didn't they do that in 2016 for Hillary, protecting her while undermining Bernie Sanders at every opportunity? So if the party feels doomed under Biden, why not do the same thing and start juggling the rules to allow a convention switcheroo? The bylaws of the DNC do explicitly mention that the DNC's powers include filling a vacancy on the national ticket. Such a vacancy is to be filled by, quote, voting in accord with procedural rules adopted by the Rules and Bylaws Committee and approved by the Democratic National Committee. That word is key, vacancy. As long as Biden is around and running, no such vacancy exists. Changing this process means changing the party rules, and that means going to the committee named above, the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee. Technically, the DNC has many hundreds of members, but the actual nerve center of the party is this committee, small enough to fit into a single DC hotel room. the Rules and Bylaws Committee. The roughly 30 members of the Rules and Bylaws Committee are far from famous. You've heard of Ilhan Omar, AOC, and Gretchen Whitmer. Interesting name. But have you heard of Frank Leone, Ken Martin, David McDonald? But anonymous or not, this is the body with the power to change how the Democrats pick their nominee. And this body, as it happens, is stacked in Biden's favor. Membership in this critical committee is controlled by the chairman of the DNC, Jamie Harrison, formerly chair of the South Carolina Democrats. Harrison owes his position to being chosen by Joe Biden, and as expected of him, he's filled rules and bylaws with reliable Biden backers. A year ago, over loud protests from some sections of the party, the Rules and Bylaws Committee executed Biden's request to reshuffle the Democratic primary calendar to reduce the prominence of states that are too white. They demoted Iowa and New Hampshire, the states where Biden bombed, and elevated South Carolina, the state that rocketed him to the nomination in 2020. So you can see here, this is political patronage right here. This is political patronage in action. South Carolina played ball. Iowa and New Hampshire did not. South Carolina gets rewarded. Iowa and New Hampshire get punished. Bryce says, so basically all the white men run it, and then the women run their mouths and are the faces. Makes sense. The presence of so many Biden political allies implies, on the flip side, a lack of allies for anyone else. If there really were a viable plot to install Gavin Newsom specifically, it would help to have Newsom political allies somewhere high up in the Democrat Party apparatus. But instead, such allies are missing. That's no surprise because he's not the one who controls the Rules Committee. In short, the DNC is not some independent actor on the left. It is a body substantially controlled by Joe Biden. Expecting it to change course in order to save the Democrats is like expecting Donald Trump's presidential campaign to be derailed by the membership of Mar-a-Lago. The 25th Amendment. Ever since the media fantasized about the Trump cabinet foisting him aside, Republicans have become enamored with this obscure constitutional provision that was previously just fodder for the odd political thriller. Recently, retiring Republican Ken Buck put forward a pointless resolution that, if passed, it won't be, would formally call on the cabinet to declare Biden unable to perform his duties. To do that, Vice President Harris and at least half of the 15 cabinet secretaries would have to formally notify Congress that Biden is unable to perform his duties. But if Biden sends a letter to Congress disagreeing, it would fall to Congress to decide the matter, and only a two-thirds vote by both houses would be enough to actually remove Biden, an even tougher standard than impeachment and removal, which only requires a two-thirds vote of the Senate. Now, would that actually happen? Of course not. But for all practical purposes, if Biden's cabinet actually rebelled to the point that a majority publicly declared him unfit, that would likely be so tremendously politically damaging that Biden would have to resign or at the very least stop seeking another term. So could that rebellion happen? Oh, come on. No. All reporting from the regime's own preferred outlets loudly broadcast the fact that Kamala Harris is intensely disliked by her own staff and has no clear role within the Biden administration. Someone is serving as the source for headlines like these, and it isn't Republicans. Here's the headlines. Kamala Harris is trying to define her vice presidency. Even her allies are tired of waiting. Ms. Harris is struggling to carve out a lane for herself in what may be one of the most consequential periods in the vice presidency. Or, a Kamala Harris staff exodus reignites questions about her leadership style and her future ambitions. Just like at the DNC, Biden's cabinet and Oval Office are a collection of people who owe their current political influence to Joe Biden. Voting to destroy him is voting to destroy their own power in favor of whoever gets picked by Kamala Harris, a person top Democrats apparently find just as intolerable as you do. Next option, pressure Biden to, quote, voluntarily retire. During the 2020 election, the press, big tech, and the intelligence community pulled off a remarkable feat of sinister collaboration by downplaying the corrupt and criminal activities of Hunter Biden and the rest of the wider Biden clan. In the last 3 years, this conspiracy of silence has crumbled. Even the Washington Post analyzed Hunter Biden's laptop in depth. Hunter himself has been charged with several crimes after IRS whistleblowers blew up attempts to slow walk the case. In the wake of Hunter's charges, many speculated that this was a tactic for them to force Hunter's dad to step aside. Sebastian Gorka tweeted, breaking, prostitutes, drugs, luxury cars, millions in tax evasion, 9 felony charges. The only logical explanation for the earth-shattering news about Hunter Biden is that they've decided it's time to jettison Joe. Of course, nothing happened. For those who imagine that they still have a plan, weaponizing Hunter Biden as a tool to drive out his father still seems like a likely scenario. But in fact, superficial public efforts to pressure Biden against running again only reveal the impotence of this option rather than its imminent success. Resigning because your associates are being targeted legally is the old norm in a more civilized political culture. The relentless lawfare campaign against Donald Trump and all his associates since 2021 has exposed the new norm of American politics. When your enemies want you in jail, the last thing you should ever do is voluntarily give up political power. Though few realize it even now, it's far more likely that the legal targeting of Hunter makes Joe more likely to cling to the presidency and the pardon power that comes with it. If a Hunter Biden scandal were used to smoke out Joe, then the election itself would be about Hunter Biden and his scandalous behavior. Even if Joe wasn't on the ballot, the immediacy of the scandal would overwhelm everything. And of course, Democrats know this, which is why precisely zero prominent Democratic politicians are talking about Hunter or giving any life to the House GOP's symbolic impeachment push. If the Hunter indictment was a deep state op, then it's an op that failed. All of this leads to one final factor: the coordination problem. Even supposing Democrat actors agreed on the need to push Biden aside in a desperate bid to keep power, and were somehow able to overcome the challenges presented above, there's a crucial follow-up question. If not him, who? The only obvious replacement, Kamala Harris, is both less popular and, incredibly, less competent than the senile Biden. The Democrat puppet masters rightly consider Kamala a non-starter. Just as the Democrat strategists understand Kamala as a non-starter, they understand the political difficulty of passing over the heir apparent, especially one who often presents herself as black. In order to replace Biden, the Democratic establishment would have to make some sort of deal to appease Kamala, and would be additionally constrained in their choice of candidates that would alleviate their base's indignation at passing over a woman of color vice president. Unfortunately for the Democrats, there is nobody after Kamala who fits this bill. There is no heir apparent on the left, no widely respected figure who stands above the rest of the field as the presumptive favorite in any primary. Their last president, Barack Obama, is the only figure who could quickly unite the party. But Barack is barred from running, so hey, why not just slot his wife in and have everyone nod along while knowing who really runs the show? But alas, Michelle Obama doesn't want it and never has. To understand the nightmare unfolding for Democrats right now, it helps to simply think back to the events of 2016. The Republican Party establishment was horrified at Donald Trump's rise and utter conquest of their party. Plenty of them refused to endorse or vote for him. Yet they were also shockingly powerless to stop him. The RNC had set rules for how to pick a candidate. Under those rules, Trump won. By the time of the July convention, the only strategy opponents could think of was trying to get delegates to simply revolt on the convention floor. No dice. The establishment did have a chance to arrest Trump's rise, but that moment wasn't in 2016. Instead, it was in the early days of the race, in the summer and fall of 2015. Most Republicans weren't sold on Trump yet, but they were split between literally a dozen other options. If the establishment had managed to consolidate around one other candidate earlier, it's fully possible that Trump would have fallen into second in the polls, lost more early states, and ultimately lost steam without getting the nomination. Now, in 2024, Democrats are seeing the consequences of their own passivity. The chance to take down Biden isn't now. It was in 2023. Though Biden's cognitive problems were no secret to anyone who paid attention, it is also the case that his mental and physical condition have suffered a dramatic decline in the past 6 months. If Biden's condition in 2023 were what it is now, the Democrat establishment may have figured out a way to elevate someone else. If Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and a dozen Democrat governors had held a joint press conference calling for Biden's retirement in an open Democrat primary, it might have happened. If Gavin Newsom or another big-name Democrat had actually entered the race and lobbed serious attacks at Biden, it might have sent Biden the message that it was time to hang it up. But nobody did it. Quite simply, the Democrats missed their chance at a party rebellion to take out Biden. They sleepwalked through Biden's senility. Now they can only live with the fruits of their inaction. And they may be living with those fruits for a surprisingly long time. Suppose Biden somehow wins another term. What then? Biden will be even older, even feebler, and even more pathetic, but he'll still be stuck with Kamala Harris as vice president. She will still be hated by her associates and by the American public. Democrats will still be stuck with President Biden, unable to let him resign, knowing that Kamala in the top job could potentially become an existential calamity for the Democratic Party. Rather than handing the reins to her, the best option might literally just be the weaken at Biden's play. Let Biden's age shoulder more and more of the burden of governance and just insist everything is fine. Biden may be senile to the point of functional brain death, but he is an incumbent and political veteran who is perhaps uniquely able to temporarily contain the inevitable showdown between the party's young activist base and the older, more moderate functionaries. At the end of the day, the Democrats must accept not only that Biden will in all likelihood be their nominee, but also face the damning reality that the old porridge brain may be their least bad option. So I think that whole thing was worth reading because he covers everything in such depth and specificity, and that really, like, That's the long and short of it. If they wanted to replace Biden, the time to do that was a year ago. And part of this problem here is, we talked about this several months ago, that there's a lot of different candidates for the up and coming talent on the Republican side. There's Ron DeSantis, who's pretty clearly knocked himself out of that, but at least he's someone you could have a conversation about. Vivek Ramaswamy, JD Vance. There's a number of different guys who all could conceivably, there's a number of different tech CEOs or other business leaders who could right now probably capitalize on some celebrity and shoehorn themselves into the Republican Party. But there's none of that on the left. There's no like up and coming talent among the Democrats who has universal appeal, who could conceivably be elected in an actual election. Gavin Newsom is, nobody likes Gavin Newsom. California is an absolute catastrophic failure. I saw recently that the California government took the bailout money that they got during COVID, or all the COVID relief money, and they baked that in as like a new part of their bottom line in their budget. So now it turns out they're like multiple billions of dollars in shortfall of their budget because that money was not going to keep coming. This is the consequence crisis. You cannot build and maintain a global empire, a global network of free trade, a complex system made up of nested complex systems that are themselves made up of nested complex systems, while also going to war with competency and promoting people purely on the basis of their political loyalty. These two things completely work against each other. The bigger and more expansive your power base gets, the more impossible it gets to maintain. So the Democrats are now facing their consequence crisis, as Jason at the 2-Bit podcast says. And it just so happens that as they're peaking in their incompetence and their disorganization, Trump is also peaking in his competence and his coordination and his organization. I saw someone did a tweet, it wasn't even worth reading through, but they basically said, actually, I think it was Jason Calacanis from the All In podcast. He was like, all the Democrats have to do is run a candidate that does this thing and 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 this thing, who's not Trump. And it was like all the Trump things except not Trump. It was like, yeah, if that person existed, that person would be a political superstar. But that person doesn't exist. A bio-Leninist coalition that promotes retards on the basis of them being easily controlled retards has burned up its entire political future. The only sort of thing that could save the Democrat Party right now is like a Republican running as a Republican as a Democrat. Like that's the only thing that would save it. So basically becoming the Republican Party. If the Democrats become the Republican Party, well, the Republican Party is going to become something to the right of the Republican Party. There are consequences to promoting incompetence. Buck Johnson says, I saw shitlib friends on Facebook saying how deep the DNC bench is. They cited Blinken. See, these people, like, they 100% live in a bubble. I have friends from Southern California that I love them dearly. They're good people. They live in a bubble. They imagine driving across the country, driving through the South, as to them it would be comparable to like backpacking across Iran. They would probably find backpacking across Iran less scary and threatening than driving across Texas. And yet you come to Texas and it's like, yeah, it's just, just a bunch of people. It's not like this super hardcore right wing. There's plenty of those people around, but it's just, just Texas. It's basically like, I'm in San Antonio, and San Antonio is basically like Riverside or San Bernardino. These people are 100% sheltered, completely holed off in their little bubble with no concept of the world around them. They are not to be feared. The only thing to fear is that they've created such a massive complex of crises that we just suffer from the lack of competence. Okay, one other, before we get to the ice cream machine. at McDonald's. I want to read this article from Bennett's Phylactery. Very good guy. He posted on his Substack, "The regime can't unseat a drooling geriatric to save its own ass, and you're blackpilling?" Quote, "The problem of evil is the difficulty of squaring the suffering we see in the world with the presence of an omnipotent and benevolent creator. Do bad things happen because God lacks the capacity to stop them, or because he lacks the will? Doomers who think we're in for a 1,000-year libtard Reich face a similar problem in reverse. If the regime is truly guarding all the doors and holding all the keys, why aren't we already being deloused in a FEMA camp? Is it because they lack the will or because they lack the capacity? A true believer generally solves this problem by assigning their enemies a sprawlingly complex and inscrutable will. The regime works in mysterious ways. It plays n-dimensional chess. Last night's debate was great television. I've seen your swing. I know your swing. Let's not fight like children. But the statement from the actual government was the post-game coverage on CNN and MSNBC. And it's worth trying to figure out exactly who is talking and what they want. Two things are true at the same time. One, CNN and MSNBC would never call for the removal of a sitting Democratic president unless they did so on orders. The shock at Biden's condition was obviously performative. None of us were surprised that he's senile and we don't work with him every day. It was decided by someone that now is the time to admit publicly what has been obvious for years. Now, I do think that some of that shock was not, how would I say this? These people live in such an artificial construct of a world that they're genuinely reacting with shock, but the shock that the thing that's shocking to them is that something like this could happen. That they could actually sit and watch a presidential debate where the sitting president who's running for re-election is so clearly and obviously senile. It's kind of like the me sowing, this is awesome, this rocks, and me reaping, hey, what the fuck? They've somehow persuaded themselves that yes, Biden is struggling cognitively, but he's surrounded by a bunch of experts who will prepare him. And in spite of his cognitive struggles, he's going to perform masterfully and everyone's going to, oh, this is great and awesome. Like they've convinced themselves that this can be a reality. But when he comes out and he performs like a cognitively disabled vegetable, then they're like, wow, I can't believe that actually happened. I thought it was not, I thought it would never happen. I thought he was just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. And obviously he's having a hard time, but when they juice him up with the right stuff, then he puts on a great performance and he's a lifelong winner. And what's continuing is just going to continue. They're very shallow, one-dimensional thinkers. So I think that the shock was actually authentic. And I would even wager that it wasn't so much that they had orders to react in a particular way. I think they didn't have orders. So they just were reacting to what they were seeing. And they were like, well, this obviously, this is the story. Someone hadn't given them like, don't react this way or protect him or anything like that. I think there was no orders. I think they just reacted. But the shock wasn't that they're like, wait a second, he's actually senile. It was reacting that their artificial bubble is being popped. But notice what was carefully left unsaid. Nobody implied Biden might actually be unfit or disabled, which would mean that Kamala Harris becomes the president. They framed it bizarrely as if Biden had failed like an ordinary candidate who didn't come prepared. And that this I think is lends credence to what I'm saying, that their reaction to it was like, wow, he really sucked. They had their little graphic already prepared of how incumbent presidents always fall flat on their first debate. So this also probably for them, they get the illusion of being unbiased and impartial. See, look, we're really critical of him. He did really bad, and we were super critical of him when he did. You can't say that we're partisan. Also, not a single commentator even hinted at who might replace him, because they're well trained in the media world and they know better than that. That kind of speculation would be inevitable if we were not dealing with a tightly disciplined media event, a de facto press release masquerading as analysis. From the DNC's perspective, it made very little sense to agree to this debate in the first place, and no sense at all to swap out the candidate this late in the game. They put Gavin Newsom in front of the camera after the debate, but he has a catastrophic record to run on and would only exacerbate the ongoing BIPOC versus settler colonialism schism in the party, especially if he got in the seat by shoving aside a black female duly elected incumbent. Kamala obviously cannot win a general election, but it's her turn, and there are really no other serious contenders. So someone is calling shots, but the shots they're calling don't make a lot of sense if you assume they're in full control of the party and want to win an election in November. Again, I think that the shots that are being called are the shots that aren't being called. I think that there are shot callers who have abandoned the Democratic Party, and the people who are there still invested in it are not updating their software accordingly. They clearly chose to hold the debate earlier than ever before to give themselves room to maneuver. But if they wanted a better candidate, they could have simply opened the primary. If someone were actually in charge of the DNC, they could have gently encouraged Sleepy Joe to step down, appointed Newsom or whomever, and forced the party to line up behind him in exactly the same way they've been lined up behind Biden. Again, Biden's cognitive performance was maybe slightly below average, but definitely not anomalous. They're with him every day. They know he's dying. None of this is a surprise to them. They could have avoided this, so why didn't they? My guess is that they've already tried dislodging Biden covertly, and they literally can't. When our guys learn that democracy is fake, the image they create in their mind is sometimes even more misleading than thinking elections matter in a straightforward sense. The managerial state that governs via, quote, manipulation of procedural outcomes does not and cannot exercise power in the same way that an openly authoritarian regime can. There is a class of people who rule via their control of the propaganda apparatus, but the need to rule that way informs the categories of moves they can make. I think this is a really, really crucial observation. If you rule through combinations, to use the Pareto's term, if you rule through combinations, through a skullduggery and remote, like actions that are remote from you, propaganda, you're ruling in the managerial sense. That limits the actual options that are available to you. You can't use openly authoritarian means. You can't be bold. You have to be subversive and try to keep yourself removed and maintain plausible deniability. So the actual category of moves that's available to you is very limited. Managerial politics overwhelmingly favor inertia and incumbency, which is why all such systems have become profoundly gerontocratic, even as they have become ever more insanely revolutionary. So you're getting both of them. You're getting the revolution and you're getting the gerontocracy at the same time, which is a tension that just causes things to break. Biden got where he is by being a dependable party man and waiting his turn. But even in his debilitated state, his and Harris's incumbency matters. If he doesn't want to go, they can't really make him without doing serious damage to the procedural system on which their power depends. The method they've chosen, parading his illness and hoping to mount enough public pressure to get him to resign, amounts to a game of chicken, which is, again, a wildly suboptimal way to get a regime flunky to do what's best for the party. Some conspiracy brothers will say, well, then why don't they just take him out? To which I would reply, exactly. Why haven't they just taken him out? I'm not saying it's off the table, but they're clearly trying everything else they can think of first, which suggests that their power is far more constrained than some imagine. Back in 2020, some people spread demoralization about how Biden's appointment to the presidency demonstrates our powerlessness, that we could be ruled by a literal empty suit, a man who appears not to be able to feed and dress himself. But now the regime is proving itself incapable of dealing with that same senile, shuffling corpse. The bottom line, these people are not unbeatable. They're not even exactly the enemy. They aren't the battle-hardened and ideologically confident Bolsheviks of 1917. At best, they're the fat, exhausted, and cynical Soviets of 1985. They're confronting half a dozen different interrelated existential crises, not one of which they have any hope of addressing. If you were a Russian dissident in 1985, the thing to do would not be to rail against the Soviets. The thing to do would be to make powerful friends, get foreign currency and independent income streams, update your passport, tidy up your DACA, and prepare for what comes after them. He's got a nice little pitch for the exit group there at the end. Exitgroup.us, go check him out. This last sentence is the most important. If you were a Russian dissident in 1985, the thing to do would not be to rail against the Soviets. This is the point. There's no point in railing against the Soviets. Prepare for what's coming next. In order to do that, you need to make powerful friends. Get foreign currency and independent income streams. Start building your own business. update your passport, tidy up your DACA, and prepare for what comes after them. So our last story of the day is this very interesting thread about McDonald's and why the ice cream machine is always broken. I'm sure you guys have experienced this. You show up looking forward to a little ice cream cone, and it's broken. Well, there's a reason why. They're broken by design, which is an interesting illustration of how things have been built and managed in under the existing system, and why the existing system has been destined for collapse and dissolution. So this is from Genius Thinking on Twitter, Genius GTX. If you've ever wondered why you can never get an ice cream from McDonald's, there's a dark truth you need to know. The machines are broken by design. Here's the real reason why you can't have your McFlurry. A thread about corporate greed and deception. Doesn't that make you want some ice cream right there? Give me some. Why are McDonald's ice cream machines always broken? It's a widespread issue, so much so that in 2021, Rashik created McBroken.com to track it in real time. Let's dive into this cold, creamy mystery. Some quick stats on the McDonald's ice cream situation. An average of 14.7% of machines in the US are broken. It's been a meme since the early 2010s. Others like Wendy's don't have this problem. So what's really going on here? Hint, no, it's not lazy employees. The culprit, the Taylor C602 ice cream machine. Introduced in 2003, it's mandatory for all McDonald's franchises. No other options allowed, period. Taylor, the provider, makes machines for other chains too, and they work fine. So why is McDonald's different?
Turns out that Taylor is the only company that is authorized to repair and maintain these machines. It's in their contract. If you call anyone else but Taylor, first off, they wouldn't know how to use it because it's such a strange, esoteric machine, but also you would void your contract, your warranty. So you call the service technician, he or she comes to fix the machine. We got our hands on some actual invoices that show how much these Taylor repair people cost. So the desperate franchise owner, the one who runs the business, has to decide, do I deal with angry customers who are yelling at me because I don't have ice cream? Or do I just call the guy and get them to come repair this at any cost? It doesn't matter. So these franchise owners end up paying thousands and thousands of dollars, not because their employees are incompetent or they're bad at training, but because this machine locks them out and they have no idea why. Turns out that
there's a note here that says, prior to 2017, anyone who opened a McDonald's franchise could only purchase a Taylor branded machine. Since then, franchisees have been able to purchase competitive machines made by the Italian company Carpigiani, although Taylor still commands the most market share. This is a note that's been added since I read through the thread and added it in here. The C602 is a nightmare of complexity. A 4-hour daily heat cleaning cycle, interface that looks like it's from 1983, cryptic error codes like heat mode failure. It's like using a Commodore 64 to make ice cream today, but that's not even the worst part. So here's
I am blown away that a product like this, with software this cryptic and horrible, can exist in 2021. The menus are horribly complicated. The error codes are not helpful. The buttons don't have words on them. Instead, they're just like a bunch of symbols. Like it's like, press the flavor button, press the ice cream button to get to here. Like to access this menu, press these two buttons at the same time. And it's like, how could you ever expect somebody, especially like an entry-level employee who's been on the job for like a few days, to understand any of this? It is a product that is set up to fail and that has no incentive to improve. Because what this means for Taylor is simply more services and repairs for their pocket. 25% of their entire business is based on this. And then there's the secret menu. In addition to the instruction manual that's given to users, I also got a hold of the service manual that is given to the Taylor service people. Like this is like the insider manual that gives you the whole picture on this machine. I am blown away that a product like this.
The real problem, Taylor has zero reason to improve these machines. In fact, they profit from keeping them broken. How? 25% of Taylor's revenue comes from repairs and maintenance. That's right, they're cashing in on their own product's failure. Surely McDonald's corporate would step in, right? Nope. Repair costs hit franchise owners, not corporate. So McDonald's ignores it while owners lose money. McDonald's is actually not in the restaurant business. McDonald's is in the real estate business. What's happening with the restaurant? You get the branding. Well, what your operations, what you're doing there, you take care of that yourself. You pay for that. One owner called for repairs 4 to 5 times in the first few months. Ka-ching! Here's where it gets shady. There's a secret service menu in these machines. Only Taylor technicians can access it. It's hidden from franchise owners and holds critical operating parameters. It's like owning a car without being able to pop the hood. So what happens when the machine breaks? Franchise owners have one option. Call the guy. That guy is a Taylor technician who charges $144 for the first 30 minutes, and then each additional 15 minutes of labor is $315 an hour. It's $315 for each additional 15 minutes. So it's like $1,300 an hour. All roads lead to call the technician. But wait, there's more. In 2019, a tech startup called Kitch created a device to help franchise owners. It connected to phones, giving real-time data on the machines. It was a hit. Owners loved it. McDonald's response? They banned it, claiming it was dangerous. McDonald's banned the device, solving their PR nightmare because they're making their own with Powerhouse Dynamics, owned by Taylor's parent company. It's like asking a fox to design the henhouse security. This goes beyond just ice cream. It's a case study of how big corporations can crush innovation and hurt their own customers and franchisees to protect old partnerships. The ice cream machine is just the tip of the iceberg, or should I say, the cherry on top. As this saga unfolds, watch the lawsuit between Kitch and McDonald's. It could change how big corporations handle innovation. The future of fast food tech might depend on it. So next time you're craving a McFlurry and the machine is broken, remember, it's not bad luck. It's a system designed to keep you frustrated and franchise owners powerless, all to protect a partnership that started back in the 1950s. So one thing that this sort of thing is doing is it's killing franchises in general. Like it's a black mark to own a franchise now. It's kind of like a game for suckers. And this is fast food, like whoop-de-doo about ice cream machines at McDonald's. But when you think about the vast majority of waste and inefficiency and the cost of running all of these corrupt, bloated, shitty companies, then innovation can have such a huge positive effect across the board. Each of these little tiny niche things, number one, it's an opportunity for someone who wants to solve a problem, is go get creative and figure out a problem like this and figure out how to navigate the legal battles or whatever. But also, as you make little micro improvements in efficiency in some places, then those can begin to spiderweb and connect with others and create an increase in efficiency overall. We've been living for decades now with antiquated technology and approaches to technology, which has bred all kinds of corruption and waste and is really that's like the manifestation of the debt that we've taken on, borrowing from the future. So I'm happy to see the powers that be beginning to form themselves behind the ideas of deregulating, getting rid of bureaucratic bloat, and putting the managerialists in the locker. I doubt that they're going to be completely successful. I doubt that this is going to happen overnight. But anytime that these people get their get their heads stuffed in a toilet is a good day. Anyways, appreciate you guys hanging out with me today. 58 viewers. Wow. 36 likes. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Hope you enjoyed the ASTROLABE. I'll be back again tomorrow morning around 10:30 Central Time. We'll do some more of this. I'll come up with some more stories between now and then. I'll tell you one really interesting schizo rabbit hole that I'm going down right now is Tartaria. I went down it just like looking for something entertaining. Like I wanted something just kind of like completely off the rails that would just be fun. And then I realized that Tartaria was an actual place. It wasn't just kind of like like Hyperborea or something that's more mythical. No, it was actually like there was an empire of Tartary, Grand Tartary, up until the mid-1800s. Never learned anything about it. Basically, it was just kind of like, oh, yeah, everything happening over in like the eastern part of Russia and Asia. It was just a bunch of like tribes and herdsmen and stuff. But no, there was like an entire empire with millions of people. Had its own flag, its own system of government, its own language, and for whatever reason, like it's like not addressed and not covered in Western history books at all. That's a very interesting thing. And then that ties into mud flood stuff and ancient technologies. There's some really interesting rabbit holes that are seem like they're going to be a lot juicier than I first expected. I was looking for something fun and like lighthearted, and here we go. I found something else very interesting. So you might hear more about that from me in the future, but I need to wrap my mind around it a little bit more. Anyways, if you want to watch something along those lines, either you enjoy schizo streams like that, then join the King Pill Discord. Go to kingpill.com. Sign up for any of the subscription tiers, and every Friday evening we're doing a schizo stream. We tried to do this Tartaria one last time, and we saw some interesting stuff, but one of the things I've discovered is that all of the people who are talking about these Tartarian mud flood theories, they're all I want to punch my screen listening to them talk. They're like sub 85 dimwits. And it's like, just give me the information. I don't need your opinions. I don't need you trying to big brain me here. Just give me the information. You went and did all the work. Just give me the data. Let me synthesize it and decide what I think it means. I don't need you weighing in on it. But this is kind of how it works. When you have off-limits information or stuff that nobody else is looking at, the first people who are going to look at it are the ones who are the low end of the bell curve. You get the low end and the high end of the bell curve are the ones who are going to look at it, but the low end is going to be the one that doesn't have the self-awareness and doesn't care. There's like, whatever, mud floods, they're hiding it from us. So they can accumulate a whole bunch of data, and then you need to get the high end of the bell curve to come in and parse through that data and figure out what's signal and what's noise. And then the next, so first step in the process is the low end of the bell curve discovers the weird anomalies. Then the high end of the bell curve goes through and synthesizes and figures out what's legitimate about the low end of the bell curve's observations. And then eventually the middle of the bell curve just accepts these things as if we've always known them, and we've always been at war with Eurasia or whatever the term is. Anyways, I don't know why I started talking about Tartaria, but that's the thing that I've been that's my schizo rabbit hole I've been going down. If you enjoy those kinds of things, then we talked about that, did a schizo stream, which is basically just a voice chat on Discord where we sit and we watch the video and then pause it and commentate on it and chat. So if you think that would be fun, then go to kingpill.com, join the King Pill Discord. Follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled, and